My name's Eli Delaney, and I have the honor of meeting some pretty cool people. These are the entrepreneurs, the artists, the creatives, the game changers that are making a positive impact in the people that they meet. And I'm a firm believer that the people that you meet can get you anywhere you want to go. And this show is my way of sharing them with you. It's my way of also helping you meet cool people. All right, welcome back, everybody. Eli here, and today we have a special guest, Jasmin Hurley. So she and I had a great conversation just last week, actually, and ended up, I got introduced by Noelle Labrie, who she's also been a guest on the show, is episode 63, 62, and we ended up just having a cool conversation. She's doing some really fun stuff. We're both SCN members and hit it off immediately. So let me tell you a little bit about her. She is a corporate attorney, U.S. Army veteran, and founder of JH Legal, a boutique law firm that provides strategic legal support to small and mid-sized businesses, startups, and nonprofits. She also specializes in business formation, contracts, intellectual property, and diverse business certification, which is always a good topic for a lot of small businesses starting out right now, with the focus on helping founders protect their brand and scale with confidence. And after years of big law, she launched her practice to make accessible, purpose-driven legal services available to underserved communities, especially in rural and military-connected spaces, which is kind of some of the stuff we're going to talk about today. So with that, Jasmin, it's my pleasure to have you here today.
Hey, Eli, how are you?
I'm doing great. Running like a madman, as usual.
Of course. Of course. Is it Friday yet? No?
Yeah, not quite yet. Yeah. And then I realized normally I don't do calls on Fridays unless it's like a specific like onboarding of a new client or something like that. Yeah. But I do have something else that I'm part of. And they're like, oh, we're doing something extra on Friday. And I was like, oh man, I thought I got to actually like do some real stuff.
So close. So
close. Yeah. So as an attorney, you had a cool bio. It talks about all kinds of stuff. You are specializing in a couple of things that I think are really a lot of fun. And I think it's underserved in the fact that you are focusing not just on small businesses, which a lot of us do, but trying to get out there and help people that are in those smaller rural communities that don't have access to, the other firms that we or as many options that we have in a bigger city, like what I've got here. So tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah. So it comes from a place of understanding. And I mean, I live in a rural community. I live in a little place called Washington Courthouse here in Ohio. And so, I'm seeing firsthand, I didn't grow up here, but I've seen the evolution of, the legal industry in this particular town and watched folks go from private practice moving into either retirement or moving up into, the vacant judge seats that are in here. Mm-hmm. And there's little to no backfill, right? A lot of the folks here, they're looking to start businesses. They're looking to sustain their businesses. A lot of them don't have the money to be able to pay some of these larger firms that are operating in Columbus, Dayton, Cincinnati. So really looking at what the town needs, what other rural areas need, and saying, okay, how can I possibly meet this need as I was going out on my own? Of course, I have a wide area of folks that I market to and I engage with across the state, but, I'm here to try to figure out how do I help my town that I live in, my new hometown that I've been here for a little less than 10 years. How do I help them grow and thrive? And the way that I help them grow and thrive is obviously going to translate across the state. So yeah, it was, I'm not going to say it was selfish, but it was a little bit because I want my town to do awesome. I want everybody to win. I want really, really cool opportunities and people with really cool ideas to be successful. We've seen folks who they've popped up, they've had some wonderful businesses, and unfortunately things have either gone sideways or they've run into roadblocks. So trying to figure out how do I help them and what those needs are has been a little bit of that driving force.
Right. Well, and, one thing that I always think about is small businesses or small towns, in rural areas, a lot of times they're still thinking in that small town feel where it's like, I'm just going to, hang a shingle, open up doors, but they don't think about a lot of the stuff, and in today's world, like in a bigger city, we're just used to, we really need to cover our rears and, make sure all the ducks are in a row and stuff like that. And I think in a lot of smaller rural areas, they still have that small town feel where it's like, we do business on a handshake, which we should. It would be great if we could just get away with that and do it that way. But unfortunately, in today's world, we can't really get away with that. We have to make sure that we have everything in a row, right?
I would say part of that is true. Yes. Yeah. I would say that folks in suburban and urban areas also have that mindset as well, because they're thinking of themselves as small businesses, right? Yeah. Small business does not mean you do business wrong, right? Yeah. That means the stakes are even higher. You don't have that buffer as if you were a little bit of a larger organization, right? Okay. You may be the mom and pop. So you have to make sure that you have your insurance in place, you have your bookkeeper in place, you have your, all of your accounts in place, you have good, solid contracts and agreements in place, and you understand what those mean. You're protecting your brand that you've created, your logo. It's all buttoned up and it's taken care of. So regardless of where people are, yes, that mindset can be persuasive. One of the things we also see is kind of the do it yourself, right? Which is fine. And I applaud that, right? That's how most people start. They have a vision, they have an idea, and they're going to figure out the best way to execute and make that happen. But sometimes you need to make sure as your DIY, you're covering your butt and you are engaging people at the right time to make sure that you are doing it the right way. I will say one of the rise of AI, it has made it a lot easier for folks to understand concepts, to maybe shortcut some of these things, which is great. But at the end of the day, generative AI is, I say the output is only as good as the input. So if you don't understand the nuances of a situation, you're going to get yourself in more trouble. Yeah. Right. I was at a little lunch and learn about AI, and the instructor said it's a people pleaser, right? The generative AI is a people pleaser. It's going to tell you what you want to hear. It's not going to be like, no, you're wrong. You're going to get in trouble, right? Especially in a legal sense. So engaging the right service providers, engaging the right folks to help you understand where you may have some risks, some pitfalls, and how to avoid that. So that's where folks like myself come in to say, okay, how do we figure this out? How do I make it easier for you to engage me, right? Not just in a, hey, you see me on the street type of situation, but does the price point work for you? Do the services work for you? So that's kind of the one of the genesis of me building my solo practices. How am I able to meet people where they're at so that they are engaging legal representation or legal engagement, and finding out what the risk is sooner, when they can be more proactive, they can really posture themselves positively, as opposed to later they're reactive and they are in this defensive posture, because ultimately that's going to cost them more money, and definitely money they weren't planning on, they weren't accounting for, and is really shortening their runway for their business.
Right. Yeah. It's interesting that you bring that up as far as reactive versus proactive, because I literally just recorded a video in that concept specifically this morning. Yeah. Because a lot of times when it comes to, being proactive, that's what we should be doing. And a lot of times we don't do it for whatever the reason, but when we have to be reactive, that's when the mistakes happen. That's when we say things that we shouldn't, or we do things that we shouldn't. We make brash decisions, and it's never a good thing. So I love that you're doing that. I want to talk a little bit. You talk about diverse business certification. Let's talk about what kind of stuff you're doing in that arena and how you're helping businesses in that side.
Yeah. So this was something that I would say I fell into probably within the first year and a half of my practice. I was just a young associate, and by young, I mean, I went to law school later in life. So I was a young attorney, and happened to be approached by a partner in the law firm that I worked in at the time. He said, "Hey, I know, you've been exploring this business, diverse business certification. Um, you know, I had friends that were military business owners. They were veterans who they were looking at becoming SDVOSB, so service disabled, veteran owned small business certified. In this particular one, this business owner was looking to become certified with the Ohio Department of Transportation as a small business. So that's really where it started. And then as I started picking apart, realizing, man, these are fantastic opportunities for minority owned businesses, women owned businesses, veteran owned businesses to be able to engage in not just only, federal level contracts, state level contracts, city level contracts, but also, being able to engage and interact and seek set asides that Fortune 500 companies are looking for. They have supplier diversity programs. They're always looking for diverse suppliers, whether they're small to medium businesses or larger businesses. So started diving into that. A lot of what we see with the certification is folks not just really understanding what the requirements are for diverse business certification, and understanding how their business is set up, and whether that's actually meeting those requirements or whether they have some issues and we may need to do a little bit of restructuring so that it truly meets those needs. Some common things that I see are people, they meet ownership but not control. So for diverse business certification, there's kind of two facets for that. The diverse business owner doesn't just own at least 51%. They have to actually control the business. And so I spend 99% of my time talking about the control portion of it, because it's really easy to say like, oh yeah, my, the woman on our team owns 51%. Great. But she's not actually making any of the decisions. She has to take that back to a board, and that board is all, is male. Has to take it back to the rest of the members, and it's a majority, approval for something. It's not, she may not be able to approve something if in certain ways, nobody can transfer it without unanimous consent, those sorts of things. So taking a look at their documents and, not just making sure that they are meeting the spirit and the intent of the certification, but then also, understanding which certifications they should be seeking and at what time, right? You can hold multiple certifications. If you are not seeking, any sort of contract opportunity, supplier diversity programs with, some Fortune 500 companies like Walmart or, those folks, it makes no sense for you to pay the fee to engage with WeBank and MSDC.
Right.
If you just want to contract with the state of Ohio, guess what? The Department of Development, it's a free program. You can, engage in certification for free, and then go from there. You don't have to gather all of the certifications right away. So, we look at the structure, but we also look at the strategy of what certifications really are needed for those particular folks. Mm-hmm. And another area where I step in is appeals. So when folks are ultimately rejected the first time, more often than not, it's about them not telling the real story behind what's going on in their organization. So they may say, women-owned businesses. Yeah, my husband owns, 49%. Sure, this is something that he started, but guess what? I've been working in the business this whole time. In fact, the reason why I took over was because I was doing 100% of the work. Right. And so sometimes we've had to tell that story as well to say, look, I do have the requisite resume and the background as the woman-owned, the woman owner or the minority owner or the veteran owner. Right. And just because it does not seem like my resume shows this, I've been working in this business for a long, long time.
Right. Nice. Well, that's cool because like I wasn't aware how intricate that could actually be and some of the details in that.
Yeah.
Because I know people who've gone through some of those processes before, but they are in that they're like you and I, the solopreneur kind of smaller space. So it's like, well, yeah, they're they
Yeah.
are the business, so that makes it super easy. But
It
there
does.
is a lot of things that it's good to know behind the scenes on that kind of stuff, which is really good. And it's nice to know you got that people have somebody like you that can go through and say, okay, maybe you didn't say the right words the first time, but we need to tell your story more, and this is what we're going to say, which that then turns things around for them,
Yeah.
which is awesome. I love that.
Yeah.
Very cool. So what was it that, after you had worked for a big corporation for a while, what was the aha moment that you wanted to get out of that and start your own thing?
Yeah. So was working for larger law firms. This actually has been brewing for several years.
Yep.
And this, I think I actually said the words, I think I want to go out on my own in 2022. And I'd been working for my last larger law firm for, a little over a year. And it was great. I absolutely loved them. It was a wonderful place to work. I'd worked in some in a stinker place. At one point, I've worked in some places where they're absolutely wonderful. And I will say Big Law is a fantastic training ground. There is no shade towards Big Law at all. It was a training ground for me. It was for me to figure out how to practice law and how I really wanted to practice law and present myself, as an attorney in the world. So 2022, I started exploring this, talking to folks. I was looking at maybe leaving and going to a smaller law firm. And I think I said the words out loud to the partner that I worked with directly the next year. And she was like, whatever you need, you tell me what you need. And the only reason why I didn't leave in 2023, because you know how it is. Once you say things out loud to more than one person, the ball really starts rolling. It's like, all right, you either have to do it or stop talking about it. And the only reason why I didn't jump in 2023 was, a family member got really, really sick and passed away, so we were just in a position where I was like, nah, this is not ready yet. Not time. And, I felt like I really, really, really wanted to start exploring how to do this if it was possible. So I left the larger law firm. I went to work for a smaller boutique firm. So, only a couple of attorneys. And that really gave me a little bit more insight into the business of law, because that's something that you don't get, especially when you're working in a larger law firm. You're not the one running your marketing. You're not the one, being your assistant, sending out a lot of these, engagement letters. You don't really think about the process as much as you should. I got to see different people wearing different hats in a smaller firm, and it was wonderful, a really, really cool group of people. But at one point I was like, you know what? I think I'm ready. I think we're ready to go. And I told my husband, and he said, you know what? When you wanted to do this earlier this year, we weren't ready. He's like, I think we're ready. I think we're in a good spot. I'm in a much better spot with my, with my work. It's always good when one person's like, hey, I'm going to go out on this entrepreneurial journey where we don't know if we're going to make any money and we don't know if we're going to pay any bills. That one person stays put at their job that can pay bills. And, care. So, he's like, yep. He's like, do it. So, left the smaller firm. And then that next Monday, I filed my paperwork and said, let's do this. Let's go. And it has been, as of next Monday, it has been 6 months, and it has been such a steep learning curve.
Right.
And I have been uncomfortable every single day. It's been a roller coaster of emotions. I was like, oh, I don't have anybody coming in. I don't have any work. There's people going to pay me. And then like the next day, 4 people paid me, and like 3 people signed their engagement letters that have been sitting out there. So it is an absolute roller coaster of emotions.
Welcome to entrepreneurship.
Well, I feel like it also gives me a better understanding of what my clients are going through.
Mm-hmm. No, I agree.
So I can empathize a lot more. I feel like I have a better a better insight into what they're going through every single day, so that hopefully that helps me pinpoint some issues with them as well. I felt like there was a little bit of a detachment from me, not in general. I'm not saying Big Law is detached. I feel like I was a little bit detached.
Okay.
So, this is something where I feel like I'm a lot more engaged because I have to be, right. I can't check out on anything, right? I can't just focus on practicing law. I have to focus on everything and prioritize. And so this has been, for me, a wonderful exercise, and also getting back to just some basic systems and figuring out, how do I structure my day, and being a lot more deliberate about doing something like that.
Yeah. Well, definitely, entrepreneurship is always entertaining, because when people do jump into it, a lot of people jump into it because they're like, I want to do my own thing. I want to be my own boss, but they don't realize how much more work is actually involved with that. And a lot of times there are a lot of people that just are not wired to be able to have that freedom. And that's a steep learning curve for a lot of people. Just that alone, not even thinking about, excuse me, you're not just, excuse me. All of a sudden I had a cough in my throat. Not just the basic doing the business, but you are the marketing department, you are the accounting department. I mean, you're doing all the different things on top of what you're really good at, and eventually you grow to the point where you can outsource a lot of that stuff. But when you first start, you don't have that luxury. And a lot of times I remember my favorite quote, even to this day, people have come to me, it's like, God, it must be great being able to work whenever you want. And I'm like, yep, I get to pick whichever 12 hours a day I go.
Right.
And they just have that deer in the headlights look, and they're not really sure how to respond to that one. But that was when I started. I mean, I was working 12 to 15 hours a day, 7 days a week. I did that for years. Eventually it did put me in the hospital, but you can't do that forever. But a lot of times people don't realize how much is into it. And I think I'm glad that you shared that, because as you coming into that side, you see the other things that the other business owners are going through, that they've been struggling with, because they have all of these balls to be juggling around. And when you see that and you feel that, it's a whole different conversation. And that's what I love about it. Yeah.
And being able to keep that open communication with clients and with anybody is really important. For me, I would hope that the service I'm providing is a lot more relationship based, as opposed to being a hired gun. I was talking to somebody, they're like, so what are you not? And I was like, definitely not your babysitter, definitely not a hired gun. Right. I'm here to help you in the long haul, because ultimately, and some of the clients that I have are folks who they helped me, a client helped me set up my IT, in conversations where he was picking my brain about contract stuff. I was picking his brain about, how to set up my IT correctly. So, and then figuring out, okay, how do I pay this forward, by introducing him to other folks that are in the similar. So I've, a lot of the clients that I've worked with, I've recommended them to do work for other attorneys that I know. So, practitioners that I know, and I think it's also given me the confidence to show those folks where you can get the right service providers in sooner rather than later. Right.
I love it.
I have a bunch of process and procedure type stuff that needs to get done. I'm not going to be able to get to it. I thought I could update my website. Not going to get to it. So you know what? I've engaged service providers to do that for me. I can have a couple lean months to get those, straight and get those right and budget properly, because I don't have the physical time to be able to do
run
that.
out of the bandwidth.
Yep. Yeah.
Awesome. All right. So let's switch gears just a little bit. I want to give people some stuff that's going to help them out. So from a standpoint of, you're helping people with their business formation contracts and this stuff like that. If somebody's just starting out, we have a little bit of a difference from like somebody's got a brick and mortar or a service-based business versus somebody like me, where it's still service, but it is a little bit different, where I'm doing like coaching, consulting, things like that. Where are some of the pitfalls people are running into from the get-go, like that getting started, and they're like, okay, I actually started my business in the wrong format that it should be. I know people go through on like, should you be an LLC? Should you be an S Corp? All that kind of stuff. Yeah. It's such one of those things because you hear a billion and one different answers anytime you ask that question. What are some of the biggest things that you see people making mistakes on that they need to be more aware of?
Yeah. So a lot of these may seem pretty practical, right? But they can cause issues down the line.
Right.
Some folks, if you're a solopreneur starting your business out, a lot of states, they don't require you to file as a solopreneur or as a sole proprietor rather. But if you elect to be an LLC, right, if you want to have some liability firewall, as I like to call it, you want to make sure that you are registering as an LLC, you form as an LLC. That means that your business assets and your personal assets are separate. That doesn't mean you can't work out of your basement. This is my basement. I work out of my basement. I work exclusively out of my basement, right? I'm not working all over my house, those sorts of things, right? I'm making sure that I'm separating my business and my personal assets. And if I'm using personal assets, I'm keeping track of what's being used. Have separate bank accounts. Do not commingle your business funds and your personal funds, right? It's going to make it a lot harder for you to understand what's flowing through your business and what's flowing through your own personal funds, especially if, you have a spouse that's working, they're receiving a paycheck, those sorts of things. It makes it a lot harder to do that accounting and keeping separate books, right? So bank account, keep it separate. Please form at least an LLC. If you are a solo proprietor, put that limited liability firewall in place, as I like to say. The other one is not keeping books, right? So you may have your bank account, but then you don't have any sort of bookkeeping system that is happening for you. I'm not to endorse things, but I use QuickBooks. It's QuickBooks for a reason, right? A lot of bookkeepers use that. They can integrate into it. They can help you figure it out. QuickBooks is fairly easy. I was able to get by with doing my books for the first 3 months of my business and do it in a way where, I'm not concerned that I did something incredibly wrong with my expenses. Now I've gone and hired a bookkeeper because I know it's going to be too much for me. And so now I'm paying somebody else to take care of it. Which brings me to my next point. Delegate when you can. Fire early, right? So if you hired somebody, it's not working, you've delegated and it's not working, fire that person and do it properly. So if you have an engagement agreement together with that particular person, look at the termination, right? The termination provisions. If it says that, you can terminate within 30 days, and there's an early termination provision part of that where you may have to pay a fee. If you're fine with paying that fee, cool. Don't just bounce and ghost and then not pay that fee, right? That's acting in bad faith. Don't do that. And that's setting up a horrible precedent for you. Some people, they will come after you for their $500, $600, $1,000, right? The last thing you need right off the bat is to have a lawsuit against you in small claims court for a couple $100. So if there's an issue and you need to fire a vendor, tell them about it. Keep receipts of what's going on, send it to them, and then follow the termination provisions. But you definitely want to make sure that you are delegating the work where you can, or at least engaging in resources that will help you to delegate that work. Or if you've terminated somebody, shifting to a new vendor or a new service provider for that particular work.
Right. No, I love it. Good stuff. And those you said, they seem like kind of simple things, but they are the things that really so many people don't do properly from the get-go. I cannot
Yeah.
count the number of times I've seen it over the years.
Yeah.
So yeah, definitely. And that's something too to think about too is, and I'm bringing this up because I know this space well enough to bring it up. And the fact of also you need to know who's like an employee versus a contractor, because a lot of people don't
Yes.
really talk about that. And they're like, oh, well, you're an independent contractor. Because it's like, somebody who lived in the, up the street, but they got to pick their own hours to some degree. And it's like, well, no, there's a little bit more detail than that.
Yeah. Yeah, that is a spot where it does get a little bit tricky.
Mm-hmm.
So, the general rule of thumb is an employee is somebody who, you've hired them on, you are paying taxes
Right.
for them, you're paying payroll taxes, Social Security, Medicare. Um, you know, you are saying, hey, you show up at this this place between this time to this time. They may be able to pick their own hours, right, as an employee, but normally they have a set time.
Right.
Um, Employment agreements, right? Those are helpful in saying, hey, you are an employee because you have all these expectations set
Right.
out, right? And oh, hey, also just a reminder, anything you're creating for us in the scope of your employment belongs to us, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Those are some of the things that employment agreements or offer letters tend to set out, as opposed to an independent contractor. That's someone who they may be operating on their own as a sole proprietor. They
Mm-hmm.
may have a form incorporated business in which you are engaging with them. They have a lot more leeway to how they are doing the work, what work they're doing for you, the hours. You may have set hours that they have to show up, just because that's the way that they are engaging with your team. But overall, there tend to be a little bit wider parameter. The parameters for them are a little bit wider.
Right.
Now, each situation is different because it can turn. There have been some situations, where case law has determined that folks that they thought were independent contractors are actually operating as employees. So,
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I've seen that before.
yeah, I think Love Island was just one of one of the more recent, or not Love Island. I think Love is Blind. One of the two, where one of the trashy reality TV shows where
Well, that
yeah,
doesn't narrow it down much.
turns out they were not independent contractors. Those folks were actually operating as
As employees.
being treated as employees in a
Right.
way. So that's one of those questions where you should be engaging counsel, finding an attorney,
Right.
in your area to ask these questions to make sure that you have a better understanding of what the parameters are, because there may be some nuanced issues where it sounds like you may have an independent contractor, but oh wait, no, you have gone a little bit too far. There are certain things that you're demanding from that particular person, so they may be considered maybe a part-time employee in those
Right.
situations.
Yeah. No, that's good. And that's why I wanted to bring it up, because I know,
Yeah.
asking somebody like you is a much better conversation than finding out, because you thought it was this way. Yeah. No,
Yeah.
I love that you shared that kind of stuff today, because it's really, like I said, I mean, I've been in business for almost 30 years, or right at 30 years. And it amazes me how many people still don't have the basics down. And most of it's just because they don't know where to start, which I think
Yeah.
is, that's where somebody like you comes in. It's like, okay, here's what you need to get going. And
Yeah.
I really appreciate that you sharing that information. So a couple of last questions with it. Is there anything else for newer entrepreneurs that are kind of starting out that you'd like to give them little any tidbits of wisdom before we start wrapping up here?
Of course. Yeah. Document everything. Make sure that you are keeping, I like to call it the data room. This is a big concept in startup law. Startups have their data room. They share it with venture capital and venture capital firms and investors. But it's something that also applies to small businesses. Have your data room. It should include your organizing documents, your incorporating documents. Those are your certificates that you receive from the state when you register, any of your licenses, your operating agreement, your certificate of incorporation, all of your contracts. have those digitized. If you have them physically, that's great too, but have those digitized. Keep those in a folder. Have some sort of repository and a backup so that you can access those in a expeditious manner, right? Especially if something goes wrong and it's stuck in your email and you can't find it, and it's 8:00 at night, and you get an email and you're just like, I'm tired, I don't know where it is. Outlook decides it doesn't want to sort things properly, even though you're using all of the proper keywords. You're like, I know that email exists. Those sorts of things. Having that data room is important.
Yeah. No,
the second thing is, folks don't realize they have intellectual property. As soon as you start your business, your marketing material, all of that stuff that you start putting together in furtherance of, just getting your name out there constitutes as intellectual property. So how you're developing it, whether you're developing it from free open sources or you're actually paying somebody to create those things for you, is also important when it comes to, how you're developing your brand strategy. But that's a whole other podcast and webinar and complete deep dive.
Well, there you go. You need to probably do a webinar on that one. And
I probably might be doing something like that in the near future. So
you got a little bit of encouragement from me on that one. I think that would be a great topic for people.
Yeah. Awesome.
Very cool. Awesome. Okay. So I got two final questions for you before we wrap up. The last one's going to be the easy one. That's going to be how people get a hold of you. So that's the part. But before that, I have one thing that I ask every person who comes on. This is the Meet Cool People show. So I'd love it if you would share, what do the words meet cool people mean to you?
Oh, meet cool people. So meet cool people means meeting people who are doing something to either make an impact in the greater sphere of the world, or just trying to make an impact in the area where they're at. I mean, I feel when you said, "Oh, meet cool people," I'm like, I don't know if I qualify, but I'm just trying to do something differently that positively impacts, the lives of the entrepreneurs and the business owners that I meet every day. I meet those people who are cool people because they're trying to do the same thing. They're trying to make a difference in their own communities. They're trying to make a difference in the world at large. They're also trying to figure it out. So meeting cool people like that are just trying to do something cool and awesome and change the world, whether it's large, small, whatever they can touch is super cool. So, yeah.
Awesome. I love it. Very, very wise words there. So Jasmin, thank you so much for coming and hanging out today. It was a good show, good conversation. And what's the best way for people to get a hold of you?
Yeah, so they can find me on LinkedIn. They can search for me at Jasmin, Jasmin, no E, J Hurley. On LinkedIn, they can also find my page, JH Legal Ohio, on LinkedIn. Find me on Instagram. I'm both on there personally and for JH Legal. So give it a follow. Also on Facebook. You can find us on Facebook, JH Legal, or go to the website, www.jhlegalohio, all spelled out, .com. Give it a look. We may be having a website refresh soon. So check out the old website before you get dazzled by the new website built by an actual real designer and not the really cool Wix landing page I put together at 9 p.m. at night.
All right. We're definitely looking forward to that. So awesome. Well, thanks again, Jasmin. This has been a pleasure having you hang out with us today. And for everybody listening, get out there, connect with her. Let her know that you heard her on the show here. And definitely when you get connected to her, keep an eye out because she's going to be having that webinar sometime soon.
Yep, definitely. Thanks so much,
awesome.
Eli.
Awesome. All right, everybody, get out there. Have an amazing, amazing week. And as always, if there's anything I can do to help you out, reach out and let me know. Take care. And that wraps up another Meet Cool People show. Now, if you like what you heard, be sure to give us a like, subscribe, or review so I can help introduce these amazing cool people to even more amazing cool people. And just remember, meeting cool people is just the beginning. You need to have a system in place to follow up with the amazing people that you meet. This is exactly what we do for our clients.
If you'd like to see if my team and I can help you, go to followuprockstar.com and check out the case study video to see exactly how we're helping our clients turn casual connections into cash clients for life. Again, go to followuprockstar.com and we'll see how we can work together to turn you into a follow-up rockstar.